What is Agile government? How can employing Agile principles improve how government does business? And what are the key tools and enablers to realizing the promise of Agile government in action? I'll explore these questions and much more with Ed DeSeve, coordinator of the Agile Government Center at the National Academy of Public Administration, NAPA, executive fellow with the IBM Center for the Business of Government, and author of a host of reports on Agile government. Ed, what does Agile mean for government?
Well, we think that Agile is a comprehensive change in mindset, one that looks at the way currently we develop and implement policies, regulations, and programs, and changes it, turns it on its head with a set of principles, which we'll talk about as we go, and focuses on increasing competence in government, respecting public values, so that we can increase trust. Trust is the focus of Agile government. We just don't do it to become more efficient. We do it to try to improve the way the public sees us as a government and try to implement the idea of responsiveness and responsibility and ethical behavior, the value of ethical behavior and openness and transparency along the way. So that's both the meaning of Agile government as well as a sense of what we're trying to accomplish. New mindset, integration of various activities, producing trust.
That's great. You mentioned, Ed, the principles you've developed or that have been developed. I was wondering if you could outline the principles of Agile government for us.
I'm going to take a couple of minutes to do this, Michael, because we spent about 2 years developing these principles at the National Academy of Public Administration with the help of the IBM Center for the Business of Government. And we start with the idea of organizational leaders. And here again, we have to find organizational leaders that are willing to move to a growth mindset so that they can then eliminate roadblocks and assume risks, empower teams to make decisions, and hold them accountable and reward them. That's the function of leadership. But at the heart of Agile government is the next principle, the mission. It should be crystal clear, laser focused, easy to communicate and understand, and constantly updated through established processes. Putting the mission in front of all of the members of the organization and allowing them to see themselves in the execution of the mission is very important. NASA does that beautifully across its various components. Everybody in NASA that I talk to can see themselves, see their work in the mission. That mission needs to be informed by evidence and evidence-informed solutions. There needs to be solid evidence for designing and implementing policy, regulatory, and program options. This can come through testing, randomized control trials, or simply looking again and again and again at what has worked in the past and adopting that to the future. Before we start out in Agile government, before we start out in implementing programs and implementing regulations and policies, we need to have a set of metrics. That's the next principle. These are developed using strong measurement protocols and should be benchmarks that can continuously be referred to for the success of the organization. Those 4 principles constitute strategy. But when we move to implementation, we see another one of the main laws of Agile, as Deming calls them, customer-driven behavior. Customers should be intimately involved in design and redesign of programs, and they should focus on the customer journey. The President Biden's customer service executive order, and even in his budget, if you go back and read the budget that came out, improving customer service in the federal government is one of the 3 pillars of the president's management agenda. I was talking to some folks in the healthcare sector who really had not been focusing on the fact that the federal government was involving customers. Tremendously important. The next principle is creating external networks, pre-positioning organizational entities to work together and leverage the support of customers and the public. These networks are tremendously important, and they have to be in position. The example I use here for networks is the National Interagency Fire Center, which is a compact among 5 federal government agencies to rapidly bring people to fighting fires in locations all over the United States, including Alaska. tremendously important. But these networks will work with highly empowered, skilled cross-functional teams. The teams need to understand what their mission is, have a diversity of thinking, and be well supported to address the immediate challenges and advance the projects. In doing that, they should use the next principle, which is innovation. Innovation to go beyond the current level of thinking about any particular idea, but to use new ideas and to use the next principle, which is speed. There has to be a set of deadlines that carry a sense of urgency about them so people know that things are going to get done quickly, but there is also persistent iteration where again and again parts of the idea go back through the discussion with the customers, go back through a discussion with the public to make sure that they're fit and they improve the agency's competence and bring trust to the organization, increase trust to the organization. We've seen this with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I'll talk about that later on.
That's terrific. So, Ed, how can we systematically and successfully apply this new approaches to federal operations and programs? How can we do it?
One of the things that I'm going to try to do is to work through the various councils, the management councils that are out there, and ask them this question. I'm going to ask the CIO council that. I'm going to ask the CFO council that, the CHICOs, the procurement officials, and the President's Management Council if I get a chance to talk to them. Try to infuse in them the idea that this is necessary, as I just said, to get rid of the fixed notion that government can't really be competent, and ask them how we can apply this. Now, the CFO Council has already, in their strategic planning, used Agile government principles and referenced the ones we just talked about to look at how their workforce should be better developed over the next 10 years. So I'll probably start with the CFO Council, but it won't take me long to get to the CIO Council and others to try to ask them to answer the question. In other words, I'm reaching out to my customers, the people who run the management agencies in the federal government, and asking them how we can best do this. Well, we're also going to need to talk to the people in the program business, and I've got some ideas about how to do that as well. But I think that's the way we're going to best apply the new approaches to operations and programs.
Yeah, excellent point. So, when you get out there and do the educational engagement with the councils and other agencies, I was wondering, Ed, what are some of the key barriers that you've seen that will kind of stop us from realizing this vision of an agile government?
The primary one is risk aversion. People have been so long worried about being wrong and being exposed for being wrong that there's a reluctance to undertake initiatives. And we hope that by helping the workforce understand the importance of the learning that they need to do, we hope by making sure that new technology is brought to them and that new communication skills are given to federal employees so that they can work with their counterparts in state and local governments, their counterparts in the private sector, to mirror some of the things that the private sector is already doing in terms of Agile.
Great example. You point out that today's government leaders at all levels need an agile mindset. And I'd like to delve a little deeper into that. What do you mean by an agile mindset? And do you have any recommendations, more importantly, on how leaders can cultivate such a mindset?
I do. It took me a while to get comfortable with the idea that this was at the core of the problem in government, that the mindset tended to be fixed. Again, I use Carol Dweck's terminology, tended to be fixed and unwilling to think of new ways to do things, new solutions in which to do things. I think what we're going to find is that training in applying agile mindset techniques, training in looking at particular problems, and being required to think through new ways of solving them that use customer involvement. The federal government is not used to customer involvement. The president's executive order is now taking us down that very important path. We then say to the people, look, you don't have to just sit here by yourself in your office. you can create an internal network and an external network that can help you look at a way to solve these problems. In the Recovery Act, we had single responsible individuals in every state, including Alaska, with their governor, who was the only governor we didn't talk to. But anyway, and we also created networks of state and local officials that we could reach out to on a continuing basis. We created networks of federal financial managers and their counterparts in state and local areas. We created an IG group, the RAT board, the Recovery and Transparency Board, which was 10 IGs working together to understand how new methodologies, new surveillance techniques could be used across the 77,000 grantees that we had and across the 22 agencies that were involved. So putting people in front of a problem and then telling them, look, you've got to think of a new way to do this. And you've got to look at these principles as part of that is really the thing that we hope will change their mindsets, showing them a new path, but showing them that they've got old problems that haven't been solved yet. We're going to, again, do that through training, through the Agile Learning Program. It will be the first element of the Agile Learning Program. We're going to look for partners around the globe, not just here in the United States, who will take our learning objectives and turn them into learning events. We find that there are different kinds of learnings that are out there. So Bill Nye, the science guy, says if I can't tell somebody something in less than 60 seconds, I can't do it. I have to be able to do it quickly and easily. I get a missive every Sunday from Angela Duckworth, who's the author of Grit, another book I recommend highly. And Angela tells me during the week which of the problems that she had was she able to solve in a particular way. It takes me about a minute to read that. So what we're trying to do is take learning objectives, turn them into learning events using partners who are already in the business. And we hope to make this a significant enterprise. We're talking to several partners now, some of whom you would know if I'd had partnership agreements, I could tell you who they were. But it's an exciting time to invoke learning within the organization as a way to help people in a safe way. We need to tell them that this is safe. You can do this. You can innovate. You can change. And that's what will be the idea of permission and safety is one of the things that will start the Agile mindset. Then showing them how it works in an Agile learning environment will be the other thing.
Good point, Ed. So earlier you mentioned the importance of networks, and I was wondering, Ed, why should networks form the default development and implementation pathway for us when we're talking about Agile government?
What happens is a single organization has whatever authority it has and whatever leverage it has to solve a problem. But it may find that the problem has, and often finds, almost always finds, that the problem has many dimensions. It has dimensions which this organization itself can't solve. Again, I go back to the National Interagency Wildfire Center, and they don't have an Air Force, but the Air Force has an Air Force. And so they create an interagency agreement with the Air Force to provide support in putting water on fires. They also don't necessarily have the ability to go into a local government area and begin an evacuation process. So they create a network that includes local law enforcement officials. In the case of the fire I'm most familiar with, it was the sheriff. The sheriff does evacuations. They don't have traffic patrols, so they work with the state police in a network fashion. And the networks are pre-positioned. These folks have training together and work together so that when the fire occurs, the network can be invoked. You can let people know, okay, we're coming in. We've got 1,200 people who are coming in. They're going to need to be fed. They're going to need to be and have a place for a tent. What do you got? That's the comment of the local community. Local community says, okay, here's what we can do. Bing, 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 and bang. And then the network communicates externally. So every night of the fire that I was associated with, it was just in my neighborhood, it was a big one. every night the major officials in the government agencies would go to the school and talk about the nature of the fire, whether evacuations were going to need to occur soon, what parts of the community might be safe and what parts might need to be very wary of the need to evacuate. That communication came from a network. It didn't come from one agency. It came from a network. And that network could talk with authority about what was going on comprehensively. So networks are comprehensive. Networks multiply the value of the mission that they're trying to accomplish. They get multiple entities to help them. If the mission is to put out the fire, or if the mission is to save people's lives, or if the mission is to save people's property, you need networks to run agencies. You can't run them unilaterally in a hub and spokes way anymore.
Excellent point. So, Ed, you mentioned earlier the integrated Agile framework for action, which you folks have developed. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. What factors make the framework useful in moving toward action and implementing Agile government?
Whenever I want to go somewhere, I either get a map by going to one of the Google Earth or something like that, or I get in my car and I punch in the thing and a map comes up. The integrated framework for Agile government is such a map. It shows people different places to start, but the fact that they have to follow an integrated map of action. So I know that if I'm a leader, that I have to be able to get my folks motivated, get them in place, have them understand what their job is. I have to take on risk of failure. I have to reward the people along the way. That's what I'm doing when I'm in leadership. I know that that's my job. I know that I have to work on the mission and vision of the organization to motivate people at all levels to try to accomplish a common purpose. I'm going down the list now. So that the integrated framework says if you do things in this order, but you also have to engage in what we call simultaneous execution. While I'm gathering evidence about what works, I also have to be talking at the same time to customers about what works and setting up a network to make it work once I figure out what I'm going to be doing. I have to create teams, interagency teams within the organization to be the spearhead of activity. I have to understand the nature of the innovation that I'm going to be needing, the speed with I'm going to be moving, and the persistent iteration that's likely to occur. So the framework is integrated, and there's simultaneous execution that's necessary in order that the leaders and leaders at all levels, I don't mean just the people at the top, it can be people who are leading on a shop floor somewhere, trying to get something done, that leaders can understand what they need to do in order to be able to increase the confidence of their organization and, with respecting public values, increase trust. That's what it's all about.
This has been a special edition of the Business of Government Hour, a conversation with Ed DeSeve, coordinator of the Agile Government Center at the National Academy of Public Administration, NAPA, executive fellow at the IBM Center of the Business of Government, and author of a host of reports on Agile government. Be sure to join us next time for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government leadership and its effectiveness. Until then, subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app, and as always at businessofgovernment.org.